up, Bri?
Number 2.
Number 2 in the books.
Gosh, it's been, what, a month or so since our last show?
Yeah. Got a lot of good feedback since our last show.
Yeah? Tell me about it. I'm not getting anything on my DMs.
Not DMs, just, people reaching out to us on LinkedIn saying, they can relate to our origin stories, especially as they've navigated their career from a networking perspective, going from one industry to another. So it was rewarding to see that we're resonating with, some small minority of people out there.
I'm benefiting from your 17,000 followers because when you post something and tag me in it, then I get a bunch of new followers. So That's been cool. You know how I'm into those vanity metrics.
Yeah, I'm here to help any way I can.
Appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about the market like we usually do. Mm-hmm. What are the trends? What are some of the headlines? But we're also going to talk about what we deal with on a regular basis, and that's job offers, which lead to resignations. Yep. And I know you have a lot more experience in recruiting doing that. I have quite a bit of it as a hiring manager. So it'll be good to sort of ping pong that back and forth. But why don't we start with the headlines?
Sure.
And then we'll roll into that. So recently, a company called Gynesonics, a women's healthcare company with a focus on uterine fibroids, they secured $25 million in funding. Skip Baldino from Endogastric Solutions is leading it as president and CEO over there. After that, another GI company, Evo Endo, got an investment from the AGA, which is the American Gastroenterology Association, part of their opportunity fund, and they have a transnasal sedationless single-use scope. So that'll be interesting tech over there. Ryan Hartman from Boston Scientific and Trice Medical is the chief commercial officer over there. And finally, a company called Mojo Vision, a developer of augmented reality contact lenses, secured $22.4 million in additional funding. Drew Perkins is the CEO over there. So those are just some recent headlines since our last show, and I know you've got a couple as well, and some people we've worked with in the past.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, AVS Medical, obviously a med tech company, secured about $8.5 million in Series B. That was a lead investor by BioStar. Companies run by Mark Tolan, who ex-Boston Scientific guy, probably there while you were there. Yep. And we did a lot of work for him and his team with Corindus Robotics before they were eventually acquired by Siemens, maybe 2 years ago. Neurostar, provider of transcranial magnetic stimulation therapy, they secured $60 million in debt funding. The round saw some capital investors, SLR, as well as Greenbook, TMS. I thought that one was pretty interesting because you recently brought on a new client that's going to be working in stimulation space, albeit a little bit different than transcranial, Saluda Medical. What's going on there?
Interesting company out of Australia, working with Chris Christangel. He's the Vice President of Growth and Strategy over there. They brought on a huge leadership team from the industry. In fact, we're meeting with them in Chicago. They just received $150 million in funding, led by T. Rowe, Wellington, and Fidelity. So some large institutional investors showing confidence in that technology. And they're doing things that haven't been done in spinal cord stimulation. They've got a smart loop technology. The system's called Evoke. And what it does is it responds to the patient's pain in real time, right? And with the opioid epidemic, people want options, right? They don't want to just take a pill anymore, get addicted, have side effects. So technology like spinal cord stimulation, especially this type of technology, is really changing the game for these patients. And it's all about options, right? We've all had healthcare issues. We have family members with them. What you want is something other than a pill. Yep. What's the root cause? And how do I fix the root cause before just masking the symptoms? So, yeah, excited about it.
And are they primarily R&D operations, manufacturing? Is that all still going to be held OUS in Australia? And then they're looking to build out a commercial presence here in the U.S.? And the reason I ask is because we see that with a lot of our early stage clients. They have their commercial presence here in the U.S. because that's where a majority of the patient population lives. But manufacturing, R&D, all the technical wizardry is still OUS. It's in Israel, it's in Ireland, it's in Australia. Are they following a similar footprint?
Yeah, and they'll split those responsibilities, obviously. They have quite a few employees already, so we are building out a pretty well-established startup, if you will. They've got 10 years in the making, this technology. So they're at the point now where they've collected data, I think, on 1 trillion stimulations. And that data is going to shape how this whole space operates moving forward. So yeah, they're splitting it between Australia and the U.S. right now. We are going to be part of their commercial build out, full commercial build out here in the United States. So very excited for that.
Awesome. So leading into that, the commercial build out here in the U.S. over the next, call it 6 months, you're going to be having a lot of conversations around offers.
Yep.
And then to that point around resignations, which is something outside of Saluda, I mean, we deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's part of our job. It's finding people for our clients, but then also shepherding them through the process of, you have one chance to negotiate before you start a new job. So how do we do that eloquently and realistically? And then how do we also, leave the organization that we're moving away from in a positive way?
Right.
Not with the place on fire and you just saying, see you guys later. Thanks for the memories, right? So something that we deal with all the time. So I guess, what are some recent examples from your side of how you walked someone through an offer negotiation and an offer discussion, as well as that back end, probably less exciting conversation? How do they resign from their current employer?
Yeah, those are important steps, right? And so for me, I like to ask the right questions so there's no surprises when we get there, right? So I start with the basics, and I wrote some of them down here. So I ask them, have you ever resigned before? Because some people haven't, right? They've worked at a company for their whole career since college. It's not as common these days, but you do see it. And if they have resigned, you have them take you through how that went, and if they could change anything about how they resigned, would they? We can obviously provide templates and things like that for the written portion, but we always recommend, a face-to-face, if possible, Zoom, at least a phone call conversation, right? Don't surprise them with a, hey, by the way, I'm out of here in 2 weeks type of email at midnight.
On a Sunday.
Right, that's right. And then I ask them, have you ever accepted a counteroffer?
Yeah.
Because that's helpful for us to know, because if they've accepted one before, maybe they might accept one again. And if so, how did that work out?
Yeah.
Right? Because typically what happens when people accept counteroffers, we get a call back from them in 3 or 6 months saying, not really working out like I thought it would. And it's not always about the money, but that's typically what's involved in the counteroffer, is either money, a title bump, something that sounds good short term. The problem is your employer now knows that you're willing to jump. So what does that do for your relationship and their loyalty to you? Right. And at the end of the day, you have to be most loyal to your own career and your family. So those are the questions. Things like, when will you resign? How will you do it? To who? And then, this is my favorite, what could they do to keep you? Right? Because you ask that question, they really have to think about nothing. I'm at the point where nothing they could do, nothing. I'm done. Okay. And still we've heard that, and then counteroffer comes, right? And sometimes money talks. It just depends where people are in that season of life. So that's been my experience in the recruiting realm. I can tell you on the other end of it, as a hiring manager, when I was trying to keep people, I would hold myself accountable first and say, what was it that I could have done better as a leader? Like, hey, first of all, congratulations. I know you wouldn't take this lightly, and you've done a good job. I brought you on board. You did exactly what I wanted you to do here. Thank you. And what could I have done differently so I don't lose a talent like you in the future? So
is your philosophy, going back to sitting in the hiring manager seat, to not try to convince them to stay? Is it trying to learn, okay, moving forward, John, you were my A+ rock star, but I also have these other 10 people that, with you departing, I'm going to need to coach up. I'm going to need to train up. How can I, as a hiring manager, do things differently from your viewpoint to make sure that these 10 don't leave?
That's the lesson you learn as a more mature leader. Early on, my question was, what can we do to keep you? Right? And so right away, it's about me. It's not about the person I'm losing. And what can we do to keep you? Short term, I don't want to deal with turnover. It's, I got a quarterly number to hit. I can't hit it with an open territory. What can we do to keep you?
More work on your plate.
That's right. And it instantly reinforces why they're making the move to leave. Because I'm making a big move. This person's not even asking about why I made the move or congratulating me. They just care about themselves and how they can minimize the damage. So you have to learn from that, and I did. But I can tell you, when I started as a manager at Cintas in my early 20s, and even as an early leader at Boston Scientific, you have to flip flip the thinking to how can I make this about them? And finally, how can I learn and grow from this opportunity?
Yeah.
So let's pivot from that and talk about how you, as a recruiter, have dealt with these offers, with these resignations. Because keep in mind, there's a war for talent right now, right? A lot of paper on the street, as they like to say, right? Medtronic just announced layoffs, so we're getting the calls from a lot of their people right now. You have to deal with that as a recruiter because they're interviewing with multiple companies.
Yep.
So why should they choose the Mullings Group, right? Why should they continue to work with Devin over maybe some other offers they're getting?
Yeah. So specifically from, the resignation side, it's always important to understand, like you said, why are they moving from one company to another? And you find that out early on in the process. And once going back to our 4 pillars, what are the things that are most important to you? And if it's, right now I'm in an in vitro diagnostic play, but I came up through cardiology. I came up as an NP, nurse practitioner. I dealt with patients in the ICU, in the CCU, the cardiac critical care unit, and that's just where my passion is. And I took a job 5 years ago because it was a great career progression and promotion, but the technology isn't what gets me going. Okay, so right off the bat, that this person's core reason is they want to get back into cardiology. So you continue just to drill that throughout the process of having conversations. Are you learning enough about the technology at X company, which is a cardiology play? Is this of interest to you? Is the passion still there? So when they come back at the end and say, hey, I'm about to get countered, you can say, okay, and expectedly so. You're a top performer. They want to keep you.
Right.
But do they have plans to bring on an interventional cardiology business unit? They don't. Okay, so you're going to still be in the same spot working for an IVD company 5 months from now, 6 months from now. And that itch that you have to get back into that specific therapy, cardiology in this case, is still going to be there. Right. So finding out the reason why they're looking in the first place is like priority number 1. Yeah. And making sure that you're continuously putting that in front of them every step along the way. You also want to be super sensitive to who they're going to be resigning to.
Right.
Because in a lot of the cases, since we work with med tech startups and small emerging companies, we're not doing a ton with these, large multi-billion-dollar global organizations. So it's a pretty tight-knit community. Yeah. And what we see is that people get pulled from one company to another based off of prior managers or leaders that they've worked with.
Yeah, who brought you over?
Who brought you over? Yeah. Who were you going to be resigning to? Well, it was my mentor, and he brought me from this startup to that startup, and now we're here. He gave me my shot.
Yep. And they're usually good friends, right?
And they're good friends. And that's a daunting conversation because, to your point, I think everyone's gut instinct is going to be the hiring manager is going to be upset that you're leaving them in a critical time.
Sure.
So walking them through that process and trying to, even if it's role playing, if it's figuring out easy ways to bring that burden in a way to them, coming with a roadmap as to I've made my decision. I feel like I've done everything that you brought me in here to do. Launch this product, revamp this product from an R&D perspective, bring something from manufacturing to a commercial effort. I feel like I've done that. And I've made a decision, and the verbiage is important because that kind of ends the counter conversation right there. I have made the decision. I have made my decision to move to a new opportunity. And this is what it's going to look like. And this is what I'm prepared to help work through with you over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to make sure that when I do leave, things are still operational or in a good position.
That's right. It's a business breakup.
Yep.
Right? And breakups are tough.
Yep.
Because there's always somebody getting dumped, right? And the company or the person that brought you on board doesn't like the feeling of being dumped. Maybe they feel like you're leaving them high and dry. If it's really a truly good friend, they'll be happy for you, but they're still going to be probably caught off guard.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask that question that you mentioned is, do you feel that you've accomplished what they brought you over for? And the answer is usually yes.
Yeah.
And so when you can answer that for yourself, a lot of the guilt that goes with that business breakup goes away because they paid you for a job. You did that job. yes, you want to be loyal to your friend and your mentor, but you can't be loyal to them if your head's in a different space.
Yeah.
And if you have an opportunity that's better for you and your family, you're getting back to a call point that you're truly passionate about. At the end of the day, we have to have purpose in what we do. We say a lot of times, do you live to work or do you work to live, right? And when you're doing something that you're passionate about, you really feel like that's not work at all.
Yep.
And so we all know when we get into something, if it's that fit or not, right? I spent almost 20 years in med device. Now I'm on this side of the table. I could tell right away this was going to be a fun transition.
Yeah.
And it has been. But I would have known probably in 6 months if the light bulb didn't go off, bad move.
Yeah.
Guess I'm going back into med device.
And,
right?
and to that point, a reason you probably could go back into med device is because you left things on good terms.
Absolutely.
And that goes both ways. That goes from the individual who's leaving as well as the hiring manager who is having the conversation with the person who's resigning.
Yep.
If you were to resign from Ambu, let's just say, right, your last company, and that hiring manager threw a fit and said, "You're making a terrible decision, Ryan. I can't believe you're doing this to me. You're leaving me high and dry."
Right.
6 months came back and you said, "I want to go back into to med tech." Your first call is not going to be back to that individual.
Sure.
It's going to say, "Okay, I've been there, done that. Now let me look for something new."
Yep.
And we see people go back to past companies because they have
All the time.
good experiences with that resignation part.
Yeah.
And another thought process that I think is really important to consider during the whole resignation discussion and how you're preparing to do it is to just take a step back and think to yourself, if I'm, as an individual, getting calls from other companies, from headhunters, there is a very high likelihood that my supervisor is as well.
Right.
And if they were to take a job, would they come to me beforehand and say, "Just to let you know,
Right.
I'm thinking about doing this"? And the answer is probably not.
No. Hey team, I'm interviewing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
How would
Right.
that play for morale, for everything?
Yeah, you see it in professional sports all the time, right? So I'm a Notre Dame football fan. The whole time Brian Kelly was coaching at Notre Dame, there was rumors of him going to other schools,
Yeah.
going to the pros. It's a distraction, right? So you're not going to alert your team that you're being interviewed. But don't be so naive, individual that we're working with, that your boss isn't getting the same phone calls from executive search firms for opportunities that you're getting. They're getting them.
Yep.
And maybe they're considering, maybe they're not. But don't be so naive to think. I think the way I want to put it is, don't think you're so important that you're the only one going through this. Everybody's going through it in their career. And the good news is, even though companies, a lot of the large strategics are having layoffs, the early stage emerging tech companies, especially the OUS companies coming to the US, are building and scaling like crazy. So the opportunities are going to be there. And with that war for talent, you have to know that you and other people, including your supervisor, are getting these phone calls.
Yeah. And then another thing that's interesting that we've seen a ton of is when those folks resign, especially with the companies that we work with, the smaller, more nimble, budgetarily constrained organizations, if they get left in the middle of a clinical trial or towards the end of a regulatory process where that person leaves for a different opportunity, there's always that opportunity internally to say, okay, let's think of how we want to manage this moving forward. Do we immediately go and bring somebody on full time, or is there an opportunity for us to look into contracting, consulting, temporary type employment, which is something that we've seen a lot after someone resigns, and especially if there's a time crunch.
Yes.
Because someone's going to have to get up to speed quick, and then once that milestone is reached, then what happens to that person?
That's right. And that's really opened up the doors for us as a firm with our TMG contract, right? So every person that we have a conversation with, we ask, are you open to contract work, right? It's called interim, it's called fractional contract. A lot of people say, well, I just want to be a consultant. Well, that's basically what it is, right? You can get paid, weekly, monthly, quarterly, on a 6-month agreement. We've seen all different kinds. The important thing is you're going to have a gap on your resume, right? How do you fill that gap? You want it to be explainable when you interview, because if you've been laid off or you just had to stop for family reasons. I talked to 2 individuals this week that had to be caregivers for their family. I went through that with my mom.
Yeah.
So that's a real thing. And you can put that on a resume, but also being a caregiver isn't driving revenue. So it means you don't have money coming in.
Yeah.
So what can you do? Well, you can work with an organization like an early stage emerging medtech company that says, hey, I want a chief marketing officer. I need a VP of sales, or I need somebody for R&D or clinical, but I can't afford them full time.
Yeah.
No problem. Here's our list of people that are willing to do contract work.
Yep.
And then that's how, Erica and our team who lead those efforts get involved. And we haven't even really started to market this as a firm because we haven't had to.
Yeah.
But we're going to start doing it, and then the floodgates are really going to open.
Yeah. And it's becoming more and more like widely acceptable in the market today.
Yeah.
With everything that's going on, with how tight the funding scenarios are for these smaller companies. Yeah. It's very difficult for them to get lead investors in, which then trickle down to the other investors saying, oh, well, if X investor's part of this, then I'm going to be part of this.
That's right.
So the consulting portion of the business is not something that when you're having discussions with hiring managers, they're looking at a resume and saying, okay, so Bill was here for 5 years, 6 years, and then he consulted. Like, why would he do that?
Right.
It's a much more explainable scenario now.
Absolutely.
And to all the points that you mentioned, it provides some flexibility. Usually, it's a higher pay on an hourly basis if you were to analyze it out. Obviously, you have to pay for benefits and PTO and things like that. But just from that perspective, there's a lot of really interesting components to it if you're looking for something in the short term.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's pivot to offers. I know we talked about offer, how you resign, things like that. But why don't you walk our audience through, how you don't get surprised at offer time. That's one. And then really how that offer is presented, right? We work with our clients a lot to get verbal acceptance from our individuals before we ever present a written offer.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're hoping, right? And hope isn't always the best strategy, but you're planning on when you get to that final stage and the client says, we want to make Ryan an offer, you've had the conversations with Ryan along the way as to, okay, let's talk about the reasons why you're looking. Okay, we check that box. Now compensation. Where do we need to be realistically for you? And I think realistic is a really important term because you have people in the beginning, they'll say, money's not important to me. And to which I'll say, okay, so if would you work for this company for free? Oh, no, I didn't mean that. Okay, so obviously there's some threshold there. Yeah. So throughout the process, you really want to try to understand what is the walkaway number and what's the number of comfort for them. What's an area that's realistic, this makes sense, and if they put something like this in front of me, there's a high likelihood that I would accept it.
Right. And the levers that can be pulled outside of traditional compensation, right? People are very interested in PTO.
Work from home.
That's right. Hybrid remote work, equity.
Yep.
Right. There's all these levers. So it's not just the salary or the bonus or the variable comp. It's these other things. So I've heard you talking to individuals for all these different companies, and it always differs, right? Yeah. What's important to me might not be important to you.
Yep.
So what's your experience in drilling a little deeper on those levers, and how has that helped move somebody from, point A to point B successfully?
Yeah, I mean, the best processes that I can think of, recently, it's you always want to establish that level of trust, that you're not asking these things because they're unimportant and it's just your own personal curiosity. It's these are the things that are going to help me as the middle person, as the conduit to our client, and getting you the best, most realistic and reasonable offer possible. Yeah. These are the things that I need to know. So I can go back to them with recommendations. Sure. Because our clients look to us to give them recommendations as to what it is going to take realistically to bring on Ryan.
So you get to that point, and you're feeling good about it. You think they're feeling good about it. And then they let you know, oh, by the way, I just got another offer from that other company I was interviewing with.
Yep.
Then you're suddenly comparing offers. Do you go back to what they told you earlier and reinforce, well, that's great, but you told me you wanted to get back to this space, or you told me this lever, equity, was important, or this lever, PTO, was important. Are you getting those things from this other offer, or how do you walk them through that?
Yeah, I mean, you try to find all that information out, especially if it's, you want to tread a little bit lightly on those discussions unless you've really established some trust there.
Right.
But if they say in the beginning, I'm having conversations with multiple employers out there,
Sure.
which even if they don't tell you that, you should assume it in today's market, right?
Yeah.
So you get to the final stages and you think you're the only ball game in town, and they say, I have an offer on the table from this company. Okay, well, not needing to know who that company is, if you're willing to share, great. I might know some people, I might know some backstory on their technology that can help provide additional data for you to make the best decision for you, because you want to get a true yes or a true no. You don't want to push someone across the finish line with these tales of lore, and then they get there and they leave in 6 months anyway.
Yeah.
So you want to just get a decision. That's what you're trying to facilitate.
That's our job, right?
It's
We
just a decision.
facilitate a decision.
Yep.
That's it. At the end of the day, and what you just said really reminded me of a story of a client I had, and an individual I was working with had 2 offers. Ended up taking the offer that wasn't with the Mullings Group, and that's fine. What I wanted this person to do, though, was, hey, you're betting your career on this company. Make sure you're doing your due diligence. Sent this person a link about the company, what was going on with their financing. Wasn't great. Great tech, just, issues with cash burn, things of that nature. Shared it. The person decided to move forward anyways, called me in about 4 months and said, you were right.
Yeah.
I should have looked at this a little closer. It's not a good situation here.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because, we can't sell people on the opportunities. They got to do what's best for them and their family, but they have to do it in an educated manner. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Our job is 100% to help facilitate a decision. And as much as people think, we're doing it because it's what's in it for us, that's the last thing. And here's why. If we burn them because we sell them on a job that we're repping, you think they're going to trust us ever again?
No.
And that's not the last company they're ever going to work for in their career. And we deal with people that are hiring managers at companies. So we treat them well. It comes back to us tenfold, because when they want to hire, who are they going to come to? People that did right by them, people that were honest and had integrity, or the people that had to sell them on a company.
Correct.
Right? And we don't always get it right, because some of the companies we represent go through growing pains just like others. But we at least want them to see, here's what's going on in the market with company A, here's what's going on with company B. You make the decision that's best for you and your family. So.
And I mean, let's be honest about it. People who try to sell you in that capacity, they're not as smart as they think they are, because you can smell it from a mile away.
That's right.
I mean, outside of recruiting, if you get a phone call, or if you're buying a new car, if you're buying a new house, and you feel like you're being pushed up against the wall, it completely turns that whole process off, and to the trust point, gone forever.
That's right.
When you call them 6 months from now, they'll have that taste in their mouth still from that first time. So you're just trying, to your point, get them to make a decision one way or another, and you're trying to help them make that decision in any way you can. And if it's going back to the client and saying, listen, I know we have an offer put together for John. There's a lot of great things in there, but he let me know in a conversation not too long ago that the most important thing to him is the skin in the game.
Right.
He's willing to take a delta on a base and a bonus to have more equity in the game.
Right.
And that is really where we provide value, because without sharing that to our client and being that middle person, they might think, he's at 140 now, he's at a 10% bonus. If we put together 155 and a 15% bonus, there's no way he won't sign. Why wouldn't he sign? Well, that's because that's what you think, not what John thinks. So it's really important for us to be that middle person and the provider of that information to our clients as to, these are the 3 levers that are most important to John. As I look at this offer, it doesn't include any of them. So before we send this out and have him look at it and say, was anybody listening to me the last 3 months of this interview process as to what's important to me? Let's make sure we include these 3 things.
No, that's so important. You don't want to receive a jack-in-the-box offer, right?
Yeah.
I'm stealing that from Joe, but that's what it is. It's a surprise.
Yep.
Do you like to be surprised? Most people don't like to be surprised when it comes to finances or their career, right? They want to know what they can expect. And so if you're honest with them throughout and say, here's the range, you're going to probably land here, but I don't know for sure. This is the initial offer. Should you get this, will you accept?
Yep.
And they'll say yes or no. Or could they come up, 10K on base? I'll bet on myself on the variable commission because, the current company I'm with offers a fleet vehicle. This company doesn't. So I'm going to have to come out of pocket to buy a vehicle. So if they could raise my base by 10K, that would soften the blow. Things of that nature where we're helping them weigh it out is we are here to facilitate a decision, and we can only do that if we have all of the information. And that's how we're really detectives in a way, right? We're finding out what fringe benefits do you have now?
Yep.
What are those worth to you, both financially and emotionally? And how do we extrapolate that out for the offer from this company?
Yeah.
And if we do that, and we do it pretty well, it usually is a seamless process.
Yeah. And if you're, let's just play a hypothetical. If you're an individual and a client that's not using a firm like the Mullings Group or any type of search firm, and you're having these discussions, the advice that I would give to an individual is make sure that your asks during this process are data-driven and that they're not just coming from things that you heard from a different industry. You heard that there's a 20% increase in base in the tech industry. So that's what I'm basing my next move off of. Okay, let's focus on your career and your space and your progression, et cetera. Make sure that it's data driven, it's realistic, and you're always leaning forward with, this is an opportunity that I want. I'm really excited about the team, the leadership, the mission, the vision, because if it comes to a situation where the firm or the company feels like we have to buy you and it's just a numbers game, it just doesn't feel dirty. It starts to feel dirty. Yeah. And then from the other side, if you're an employer and you think you have Ryan on board, I would always think, because this is how I think, is what is the one thing, or maybe two things, but what are the things that could derail this that we haven't uncovered? Like, and even having a conversation with them.
Yeah, ask that question.
Ask it. You have the offer in your hand. Yeah, it looks great. Okay, awesome. What is something that could throw this off? Nothing.
If I get a better offer from another company that I'm interviewing with first, right? Speed can be an advantage if you're on the right side of it. Yeah. And it kills if you're not.
Correct.
How many good individuals have you lost because a process stalled on your end because of unforeseen circumstances? Maybe a decision maker had a vacation, or there was a health issue, or any unforeseen circumstance. How often does that happen? I feel like it happens on my end more often than I would like. Yeah. Because you can't control the future.
Correct. Yeah. And whether it's looking for a new career opportunity or buying that house or buying a car, time kills all deals. And that's just not specific to our space. It's specific to any type of deal that's out there. So that cadence is important.
Right. Number of interviews. How long they are. Yeah. Are they face to face? Are they remote?
Yeah. How much data is being given back and forth so this person can make that decision? Yeah. True yes, true no. And along how far of a time frame. Most of the searches that we participate in, it's 45 to 60 days. They're sprint type of interviews. You're meeting with the hiring manager. You're going on site. You're meeting with the team. We have the fortune of being able to have access to CEOs of these companies and VPs and CCOs and the whole C-level team that can get involved in these interviews, where larger strategics, you don't. Sure. So there's a lot of buy-in and there's a lot of communication back and forth there. But yeah, you're right. If they say we get to that final point and, oh, by the way, we need to hold on this until we get our B round, it'll kill the deal. Right. And so the exact number, I don't have an exact number, but like you said, does it happen more often than you like? Sure. Yeah. One is more often than you like, right? You hope that every process you get into with a client and individual is constant communication from both sides, but that's just not the reality of anyone's world, because our job is we're constantly getting in the middle of their day to day. Whether it's the client side, they're trying to get products across the finish line. They're going down a regulatory pathway with the FDA. They're doing design for manufacturing. They're ISO 13485ing a facility. And you're saying, excuse me, do you remember, that we have John in the wings here? Yep. And then John is also doing the exact same thing at his company. So it's trying to find that constant cadence of communication from both sides to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, personally, I like one touch point a week
Yeah.
that makes that person stay engaged. Because if the other company they're talking to, or companies, they're having a conversation weekly and you're not, who are they going to be more engaged with? The momentum, right? Think of momentum. Mm. I feel like momentum's happening when I'm having collaboration, conversation. Silence kills.
Yep.
Right? So if there's no update, I get nervous, right? No news is bad news when it comes to that. It's not good news, it's bad news in the job search. So listen, I know we're running up on time here. I want to share something funny with you. So this is why I want to bring home the point. I know you're going to laugh at this, but why do you want to work with somebody professional? And if you're not working with an executive search firm like the Mullings Group, that's fine. But don't just surprise people with an email. So everybody uses AI these days. Yeah. So just for fun, I typed into ChatGPT, write a 2-sentence, grateful and funny resignation poem. Okay, here's what they came up with. Dear boss, it's time to say goodbye. I've loved this job, but I need to fly. I'm grateful for the laughs and pay, but my dreams are bigger than this cubicle, okay? Not great, right? Here's one more. Dear boss, I must confess, I'm leaving this workplace for a life of less stress. But don't you worry, I won't be a jerk. I'm grateful for the memories and the paycheck that worked. I don't think so. Work with some professionals. Yeah. This is a very personal decision I'm making for me and my family. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope we have a chance to work together again in the future. Yeah. That's how you want to leave things.
Yeah, no poems.
No AI.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun.
Great time. Until next time.
This has been the R&D Podcast.